Now to go a bit more into the content, I'd like to stress that it is clear and it is also positive to see that from our internal feedback around the majority of you has undertaken a real reflection about the possible scenarios to ensure that the work undertaken by the partnerships over the years does not simply get lost, and that in case funding would be discontinued. The feedback that we received also shows that various partnerships managed to share solid first drafts following these reflections and are mostly in line with the Commission guidelines. However, without going into details, as this will come later in the presentation to be done by Lucas, it seems that there has been an overall trend to argue for the continuation of the partnerships in the strategies, which is due to the specific importance of those partnerships. I'd like to emphasize here that while it might be valid consideration, this is not the purpose of this phasing out exercise. The phasing out strategy has exactly the purpose to prepare partnerships in case non-renewal of the EU funding. So the discussions and reflections on the continuation of partnerships will take place in the different reflections and fora, for instance, also in the current intermediary phase and the preparation of the next framework program. So the purpose of the workshop today is to share feedback and also general observations across all the strategies that we have received, in addition to the individual feedback that was shared with all partnerships 2 weeks ago. This general feedback is valuable and should also help all the partnerships in improving their strategies and, of course, strengthen and fine-tuning these strategies. And in the second part of the workshop today, there will be an opportunity of peer learning and to share experience challenges per cluster in the context of the breakout sessions that will also involve some of my colleagues in the afternoon. So I would like to encourage you to openly use the cluster discussions to share any doubts, challenges, questions, and so on. And having said that, and to go immediately into the point on the feedback of what we have received from you, let me just wish you a fruitful workshop and also emphasize that this workshop is to help and to facilitate the finalization of the phasing out strategies. That would be my short introductory point. And before I give back the floor to Lucas, I'd like also to warmly thank Lucas for the preparation of this workshop and all the work that is behind. So thanks a lot, Lucas. And to all of you, enjoy the workshop, and I wish you a very good meeting. Bye-bye. Lucas, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks a lot, Fabienne, for the introduction, setting the scene, and of course also for the kind words. So this brings us to the second part of this workshop, which will be the actual feedback. However, I will not jump directly into the feedback as such, but I will also set the scene in a bit more in a deeper level. So quickly going over the agenda, we just had the welcome introduction, the presentation, which will be done by myself, as I was in charge of coordinating this exercise within the Commission and also towards yourself. This presentation will also include some next steps. Then there will be a chance for Q&A. Everybody here has the opportunity to ask some questions. Here I will already highlight the fact that this is obviously a Q&A session to either comment on the presentation or to ask general questions, not so much to pinpoint certain feedback that you got individually, which can be something that you can do in the cluster workshop if that is deemed useful as well. Then after that, we have the collaborative work, which I just said, breakout sessions. This time, in difference with the workshop we had in September, there will be only 4 breakout sessions. Cluster 2 colleagues were invited to join that cluster that they find most relevant, because last time, as there are so little in this cluster, they would benefit from being in another cluster. So only 4 breakout sessions, which you'll be able to go into yourself. If necessary, we can assist you. And then at the end, there will be some highlights from the breakout sessions and the conclusions and the next steps. Then allow me to continue the chain of thanking people. As Fabienne just kindly did, I would already like to thank the moderators, the colleagues who said that they would be able to help with this. So thanks a lot. And also ERA Learn, who is supporting with being rapporteurs, not only for your questions during the plenary session, but also for potential questions during every breakout session. Lastly, to highlight here, every question that is asked today, which has not been yet answered in our frequently asked questions or is coming from the guidelines, will be added to an updated frequently asked questions document, which we will try to, of course, deliver as soon as possible, as the deadline of March is not that far away. In the meantime, this recording and questions and possible already answers will be uploaded also as soon as possible, hopefully still even this week. So that's some background for today. Going back then to the actual presentation and the feedback, this, as Fabienne said, that is general overall from all the close to 40 strategies that were reviewed within the Commission. For your information, the process within was coordinated by us, RDDG4, Policy Unit on European Partnerships, as you know. Then they gave some horizontal policy guidance, and then we included all the thematic colleagues for context and more thematic specific insights, as they obviously know your partnership is good as inside out. So these combinations were then consolidated, and they were shared with you as individual feedback. Now, the objective of today is to have constructive feedback, general observations that are useful for you to take back and then strengthen, improve, fine-tune the current draft in addition to your individual feedback. It's important here to highlight that some of these feedback that we share today might not be shared individually with you. That doesn't mean that it doesn't apply or cannot be useful for you. So please keep that in mind, that some things that are said here today also are very worth considering, even if it was not part of your individual feedback. So then I'll start with my presentation. Going again over the rationale of this phasing out exercise, it should be clear by now, which from the quite good drafts we got, it is mostly clear. However, from the partnership community, we still saw that there was some doubt on what the actual objective is as such. Besides the fact that it's a legal obligation, which then should obviously be fulfilled, it is also a proactive exercise where you look at the future if funding does stop, framework funding. This is very important because if we do not do this exercise and there is no FP funding anymore, which nothing in this whole exercise preempts continuation or no continuation, you should be prepared. You should at least have thought, reflected about this thoroughly. So whatever happens, you are prepared. So that's just part of this exercise. The main goal, I kindly ask to mute those who have not. This is not the point of us trying to streamline here or whatnot. It's about you and all your work not just being gone, so to say, if the future goes in that direction. This is just making sure you are covered from all fronts, if I can put it like that. Now, lastly here also, the 2 final points, developing a phasing out strategy, as I just said, highlight again, does not mean that you will be discontinued as such. It's just for your partnership to be prepared in all scenarios possible. However, if you do not comply, it's a weakness when assessing the partnership performance. And also, again, I mean, not complying of a legal obligation is never something that we encourage or should be done. Then, going back to the Commission guidelines, where I would like to highlight, well, obviously the guidelines as such, which overall were pretty clear and taken well into account. However, there seems to be some questions or some further clarification needed on what these compulsory elements actually include. Now, before we go to these questions you might have and whatnot, I want to already share with you something that we noticed is that many ask for a template exactly for this reason, to know what is expected as such. However, when you work with guidelines, which was the purpose, you have the flexibility to adapt as much as possible, as best as possible, to whatever fits your partnership best, whether the mode of implementation, whether the governance structure, whether your stakeholders, all of that provides for flexibility, which then obviously needs to be balanced with what is actually expected. That is also why we're doing this feedback round, so we can clarify expectations from our side and you can take this with you. So concise and strategic scenarios, several can be explored. Jumping directly to the compulsory element, you need at least one that has no FP funding. So the core of this exercise is to have at least one scenario in your strategy where you do not rely on EU framework funding. This was not communicated before, but I'm doing this currently, is that the no FP scenario should be listed first in your strategy. As it is the core of the strategy, it makes sense that this is also what you read when you start going through this strategy, not to first have a possible scenario about continuing under FP10 or whatnot, which is something else I will come back to. But actually, the core of the exercise should be in the beginning of your strategy. So please take this into account when finalizing. The no FP funding scenario or scenarios should be listed first in your strategy. So the second part, each scenario should have an alternative implementation modality, a realistic actionable pathway, and indicative timeline. This is something that we noticed that has been quite a struggle for many. While there were very good included and different attempts were made, we will also dig a bit deeper in this. Same for the indicators for assessing progress towards phasing out. These are different from indicators that you currently have to monitor what your partnership is doing. More details will follow on this as well. And then lastly, consistency with overall strategic orientation and coherence. This is something that was overall obviously very well taken into account. Partnership, you, the representatives and the stakeholders are very well aware about the future strategic context and policy, and you took this overall well into account. So no real feedback as such. So jumping into some don'ts. You might remember from the workshop in September, there were don'ts and do's. I will not go over the do's because majority took them well into account and they don't need a reaffirmation that they were taken well into account, as this is not the purpose of this feedback round. But I'll use these don'ts to reflect this on the current state of play of what we have seen. So the first don't, not that box ticking exercise, I can be short. This has not been done by any partnership as such. Just a comment or feedback here would be that we've seen some strategies where they're really more like bullet points, short, to the point, which in a way is good because we said 3 pages per scenario, which should be the case. However, some additional context or some additional details, of course, contribute to making your scenario realistic and actionable. If it's just very short, it doesn't say much about how things will happen or how things will evolve, right? So that should be avoided. I will jump, by the way, from here and there to some things that we saw, the colleagues as well. But I will not single out, of course, any partnerships draft strategies today, because that could not be, that's not an advantage to anybody. So not about listing achievements or past performance. Also here, we have seen this rather often, that you first introduce your partnership by saying what you have done and how good you are doing. This is obviously very good on itself, but as the strategy itself should be a concise document, please take those parts that are really necessary. A short introduction about your partnership can be done in rather a few paragraphs or points, so to say. And if anything that you find very related or very important for the strategy to support any of this, welcome to put it so, but do it then in the annex. Status quo does not constitute a scenario. Here, I have to say that we saw that many partnership, as Fabienne earlier also said, and this is linked to the rationale, it is not to prepare yourself and show how important your partnership is. While it's very valid argumentation we read, it makes perfect sense. Making a case to remain a partnership is done in another exercise. This is not done in the phasing out, because the phasing out is inherently another objective. It is not about continuation. It's about what happens when we do not continue. So you can't have them both basically in the strategy because they contradict itself. And I hope that that different angle makes it clear, because it really impacts the drafting of a strategy, right? When you think about what if the funding is not at all a case, how can we then continue or make sure that we don't lose everything over. So that's important to remember. This is linked also to the other bullet point, not a case for extending. And then lastly, avoid scenarios that assume complete loss of all funding. Also something here that we as such haven't really seen, right? The majority really had good policy considerations and reflections about the future, but still, in general, try to be as realistic as possible, in the sense that do not assume that your topic or your thematic work will not be worth anything or not get any attention under the next FP10. You never know, of course, things happen fast. I'll use a cliche example of COVID, but then, still, it's rather rare. Concise and strategic. So overall, as I just said, use annexes. Don't focus on things that have that are not relevant to the strategy as such. Really focus on the proactive, forward-looking part, and not so much on the things that I mentioned earlier. Moving on to the apart, let's say, different mandatory parts of the guidelines, which deserve some more attention one by one. So the first, at least one credible scenario without FP funding. As I said, this is the core of your phasing out strategy and of the exercise. There should be one. If you don't have one, you don't have a phasing out strategy, and there is non-compliance, which we then also in March will not be able to approve. Here, it's interesting to notice that different strategies included this non-FP scenario, but we're a bit lost in the overall strategy. This is linked to what I said earlier. Please put your non-FP funding scenario first. So let's say you don't have to look for it. And also, a non-FP scenario should be clear, in the sense that it should not be assumed when you read something, this might be a non-FP scenario, right? It should be a standalone, no FP scenario. The moment you start talking about maybe we can get some, we can take part in some calls, or we can have a CSA, for example, to support us. It's important that you make this difference very clear, because it's not allowed, but the core of your activities should be no FP funding. So please make this as clear as possible in your strategy. Even if somebody who doesn't know anything about partnerships reads your strategy, it should be clear, okay, this is no FP funding. Then also here, I would like to add standalone scenarios. We've seen some scenarios which, very well elaborated, but because they have different ones, they start to intertwine a bit, right? We have this scenario, then you go to another one. This one is linked or is complementary, which in itself, again, if it's well thought of and well thought through, not an issue as such, but please always be clear, because there are some scenarios where we really discussed in between a few colleagues, is this now no FP or is this FP? Because it was just not clearly indicated. Neither became it clear from the actual strategy as itself, from itself, right? The other information that was part of it. Moving on, alternative implementation modality, a realistic actual pathway, and an indicative timeline. So here, as I said, this seems a bit more of a challenge for many, as there are obviously 4 parts here: implementation, modality, risk, actionable pathway, and indicative timeline. 3, 4, how it depends how you look at it. But this really needs to be well articulated. Avoid being too descriptive or too vague. Some have a lot of text, but there actually no concrete identified action, or they use a lot of, let's say, words to actually not come to what will actually happen. What is the concrete action? So please, this stands over the actionable pathway and the clear actionable steps. So it would be good if you go over your strategies again to see where you could potentially improve and strengthen this, right? As I said, this feedback round is about making your strategy as strong as possible with the feedback that we're giving today. I put on also polls that we collected during our feedback rounds from the colleagues. So if you, for example, say we will set up a new legal entity on itself. Just a second here. To mute. Yes. So this is on itself, of course, it's a concrete action. We will set up a new legal entity, but there are so many different actions that are linked to it, right? What about its governance? Who will pay for setting this up? How will this work? We said, and it still stands, that strategies are living documents. You cannot anticipate everything. We are aware, but also here, strengthening, fine-tuning. If you can already give some more bites, let's say, to your actions, it really makes a difference to actually see whether it's actionable and realistic, right? So these are things to keep in mind. Another example is funding will come from membership fees, something we saw here and there, which is of course on itself perfectly fine, makes a lot of sense, good. But what are you aiming for? How will this be done in practice? These are already some things that you could potentially think about, and not obviously go into depth and try to put everything already in boxes and have it all figured out, but some more reflection on a few more additional steps to your one step that you gave. And we gave some examples here in green. For example, organize a survey, talks to discuss commitment, membership of the partners. This is something already concreter than we talk about membership fees. Already talking about a bit more of detail how it will be done. Another example, agreement of the amount of funding, membership fees per committed partner by date X. 3 years before you start, your funding might end. You can already put this in your timeline, for example. More concrete and a bit more detailed than just saying we will work with membership fees. And also formal adoption of a business financial sustainability plan. Also another example of something more concrete than just saying we will discuss our next step and see how we will continue, as an example. Moving on to the timeline, because this is also something very important. This is on itself, of course, a minimum requirement, a mandatory requirement. So this is also something that would be needed for each scenario, right? We saw some strategies where you have 2, 3 scenarios and then one timeline. But the strategies themselves, as mentioned before, stand alone. They are different. One of them is at least no FP. So having one timeline for all of them, it kind of also contradicts itself at a certain point. However, if you have a timeline where you talk about the strategy itself as a whole, by this date, we want to do maybe an update because it's a living document. Let's say after the proposal is FP proposal is adopted, we might open this discussion up again. Those are obviously relevant time indications for the overall strategy, but important that each scenario should have its own timeline. Also here, it needs to be realistic and credible. When you say you will set up a legal structure and you then identify doing this in 2-3 months, it's also a bit contradicting the realisticness and the credibility, as for our own experience, setting up legal structures require a bit more time than a few months, as an example. So the starting point of the indicative timeline at a reasonable point in time ensures smooth transition. Also here, again, realistic and credible. If you have quite a lot of strategies or scenarios or one, and you start this implementation or some actions to actually set this in motion, let's say 1 year before your funding might end, it also here contradicts a bit, or depending on how big the goal is, with the realisticness and credibility of the strategy. Then the balance between listing formal legal points in time and actual step. Also here, you can list different things linked to the other slides, but also make sure that it's all coherent. When you say we will do this by then, this action, make sure you also make that there is enough time to actually reach these objectives that you have planned. The third minimum requirement, indicators for assessing progress towards the phasing out. So something here that we saw overall is that there is some confusion on what these indicators actually are. So as they say, assess progress towards the phasing out, not to assess the current partnership or monitoring the current partnership, its activities. It's a very big difference. The purpose, the objectives are not comparable. They are just measuring different things. I have set an example here of something that was seen often. We will do so many calls. We will do during the partnership. We will monitoring whether the partnership is actually reaching this and that, which is linked in a way, because it shows what activities that might be good and which ones you then actually want to take with you after the in your strategy, because you, let's say, indicated them as itself that these are like your core business and the legacy. You see what I mean with some linkage, but it should be really quantitative indicators that can show the progress towards the actual phasing out. I put 2 examples here. Signed letters of intent by partners is a very clear indicator of whether you will be able to manage your foreseen phasing out process or not. If you do a survey and you have one partner who wants to commit, this is a clear indicator that talks about the progress, right? Same with the formal adoption of the final continuity plan. Also this, if there is a formal adoption on the next way forward, this is also a clear indicator that there is progress towards the phasing out. Here I make the point that it's linked to the indicative timeline. I use an example, X amount of money pre-committed by date X. This is both something you could put in your indicative timeline as you want to reach it by this time. And also it shows on itself an indicator of money that you probably, or commitments beforehand. Going to the 4th minimum requirement, as I said earlier, overall, very well taken into account. It's clear that you, the partnership representatives, the stakeholders with whom you work, are very well aware of everything that's happening in this policy context, what is happening regarding the next MFF, what is happening FP10, and of course, this is missing here is the European Competence Funds. Considerations are taken well into account, and here I think it's useful to mention that the strategies are living documents, but you cannot use the living document aspect as, or you should avoid at least as much as possible to use this, as there is too much unclarity or uncertainty about what's coming. We know that it makes a lot of sense, but you should make some assumptions, some realistic assumptions, and take those then into consideration or into account within your strategies. So, keeping in mind a bit the time, as I'm a bit over the time, talking about timeline. So, as Fabienne also kindly said in the beginning, we had guidelines in the summer, workshop in September, the feedback round in December, which the majority of you respected. So thanks again for that. That makes the work quite nice, the cooperation. And also here, this is missing, which I want to add, is the workshop on the annual forum on the phasing out strategies. I recently went through the report again, and also there it seemed to be very useful and also a very good opportunity for the community to talk with each other and share some ideas on the future. So we are currently in February after the feedback rounds where everybody received their feedback also almost 2 weeks ago. And then the next and the final step would be to share your final strategy with us, with the Commission, DG RTD G4, and we will then approve your strategy. This is the assumption we have, as they will all be very in line with the minimum requirements for adoption by the 31st of March. I had some questions already on this by email, so I'll try to clarify as much as possible now. Otherwise, please come back to this later because it's an important point. The adoption of the strategy should then be done within the relevant governance structures after you receive our approval, right? So if we say your strategy is approved by us, please go ahead with adoption. This means that you take immediate necessary steps to get this formally approved. This is very different depending on your own governance structure. So we are not putting a deadline on this on purpose. Because if you have a governance board meeting mid-April and you can formally adopt, good. But if you have it 2-3 months later, we're not going to force you in that sense to have it by X date. So this is let's say, done on purpose to also here make sure that there is sufficient flexibility for you to make this happen. There is the other point about that, while we cannot share something to the Commission that is not approved as such, here also we notice that there is also some flexibility. There is, I'm not saying how it is within a governance structure, but for example, I already heard that it could be like a pre-approval, which you can then share with us. Pre-approval by your own governing board or structure, you can send with us, and then afterwards you can then approve. It's also important to highlight here that this is not a feedback round. It's approved, not approved. So once it's approved, you can go ahead. Not approved, hopefully not the case, we'll take it from there. So that's also an important difference to make. So I came to the end of the presentation. I really hope it was clear that you got something out of it. It's useful. I gave you some good insights, hopefully, to take with you over, to go over your strategy again, and fine-tune, strengthen, and align with what was said today. I saw in the meantime a lot of chat pop-ups, but I haven't read any of them as I was focused on the presentation. So please, now the floor is yours. We're a bit behind schedule, but let's try to get at least as many questions as possible, and then move on to the breakout sessions. Highlight here again, please keep it general, useful for everyone. If you have any questions regarding the feedback, I am here, of course, as I coordinated. If there are any more questions on really content and whatnot, I am also here with my colleagues who might jump in where necessary. So please, I will see who has raised hands.
Yeah, I had Lucas.
Yes,
thank you for the presentation. Just no FP funding was mentioned in the beginning a lot. Does that cover no FP funding or the partnership structure, which is already the case for many co-program partnerships, or is it no FP funding for the topic covered by the partnership?
So I'll directly answer this because it's no FP funding for the partnership, right? So if you are, of course, I mean, as a co-program, there are some examples. If you just become a self-sustained association again, and your core activities can be taken care of with no FP funding, but then you want to take part in a call launched under FP10, that's a clear difference. You don't need the FP funding to actually exist. You see, that's where we kind of like make the difference and draw the line as such. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah, that's clear. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? I cannot see who raised his hand, so please just, if you want to, it's not answered yet in the chat, just as Wouter just did, please just take the floor and ask.
Okay, then I will go next. Eva Schillinger here for Innovative Advanced Materials Initiative. We are one of the latest additions of partnerships to Horizon Europe. So for us, this exercise is pretty, it's as if you're crafting your own coffin nails before you can walk. But okay, it's a bit interesting. On the other hand side, I was wondering, because connected to what Walter just asked, if the funding will still be there, of course, for the topics in Horizon Europe, what does that concretely mean for? Is there a wish then also to have stakeholder interaction included in future scenarios for the body that you are representing with the European Commission, or how is that supposed to then work in future? Just to understand what you might be looking for also.
So yes, thanks. Linked to this, I would say, and please, colleagues, jump in if I'm missing something, is that as a co-programmed legal entity is also way more than just going for those calls, right? So if you have the network on itself can also be considered an asset. The corporation within, the knowledge valorization, the information flow are all very useful things. It depends on how you want to tackle this. I mean, if you want to put the main objective of continuation on actually still being able to take part in calls, then that is something that is a choice and that should be reflected in your strategy.
I was less talking about participating in calls, just to clarify. I was talking about a consultation from in the European Commission side or DG RTD side when setting out calls and topics, as is happening today, of course, with the partnerships. So would the Commission still be interested in having this interaction with stakeholders that then are represented by, in the case of co-program partnerships now, by us as associations, as independent legal bodies? Because I think that also merits a bit of clarification here.
Yes, thanks indeed. In that sense, I would ask a colleague to also intervene, but there is still some unclarity on FP10, and I mean, for now, I would not know the Commission's idea on how to involve stakeholders overall when drafting those calls, right? But I mean, if your topic on itself is strategically relevant and fits the policy context of ECF FP10, then it's fair to assume that there will be calls that are relevant for your thematic map.
Lucas, I also, I thank Walter for the question and Eva for the second question. I think that's really an important point what they asked, because I have sometimes the feeling the different commission services, you all have different backgrounds, come from different parts of the Commission, and there is not a full understanding of what the partnerships do and why we got engaged. I mean, we got engaged because there was a common understanding that Commission official alone cannot know how to write a call topic, and in a certain technology, you cannot be an expert on everything. So the idea was to give experts the floor, to involve them, to draft a roadmap, and then also while working with these experts, especially if they come from industry, to involve them in EU policy making and attract them to European funded calls. So in our area, manufacturing, before we had the partnership, it was very much an academic exercise. Only universities and some consultants participating. And thanks to the partnership, we gave the vision to industry and say, look, maybe you don't get a call next year, but in the next 7 years, because it's roadmap based, we will identify the right topics, So if now we are supposed to write a strategy as a phase out, and there is no future projects and phases and topics, well, the one point gets a bit, we missed the point, I mean, I can tell you already now, because the last year's success rate, I mean, it was always bad, but the last year was horrible, 3-4% success rate. So we got even not only from companies, they are anyway discouraged very fast, but big research organizations, I won't name it, they say, look, we will go out. We are so frustrated. So we are out. The success rate was so low. So sorry, we are leaving. So they are leaving, although there is money, but they're frustrated because the success rate is low. If there is no money, I wonder who will then stay involved and stay as a member. So that's a bit my worry. And so on the one hand, we know we need to do the exercise, but you should also be aware why people got engaged and what's the whole point. You know, it's about investing public funding in a good way, in a cooperative way, to really make the best out of it. So just to say, it's for us a difficult situation also to go to a governing board, because basically then we have to say, look guys, and so maybe there's no partnership in future, and so we need to draft the phase out strategy, what to do then. Yeah, and then basically the answer could be, well, shut down the whole thing, because what's the point? You know?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean,
a difficult situation, you know.
I hear what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense. And I'll just quickly, without neglecting the importance and the stressful reflections on your side with the governing board and the stakeholders, it's I mean, I can just summarize it. It's a strategy. It's what happens if we have no funding anymore. How are we preparing ourselves? Whether that will actually be the case, it's not so much to already anticipate. I mean, yes, you anticipate in your reflection, because it's a strategy of how to prepare yourself.
But may I ask a clarifying question? Maybe that helps. Sorry to interrupt. Because maybe we are speaking about two different things. We are representing the zero emission waterborne transport partnership. I maybe approached it in the wrong way, that I thought I look at there is no FP10 funding anymore, but we know that we still have to do research to achieve some of the objectives. But if I understand it correctly, what you just said in the first 20 minutes is we need to look at what we will do with the partnership as such. So with the group of stakeholders, with all the collective knowledge we gained, how we transferred that, instead of looking at how are we going to achieve the objectives. Do I understand that correctly?
That is 100% correct.
And that makes the exercise completely different.
Yes, and that's what we try to emphasize, is that it's not about how do we continue with less funding. It's about how, if we do not get funding anymore, if that would be the case, can we make sure that we don't just close shop and lose everything that we have done in the last few years?
Exactly.
That's the reflection of the goal of the exercise. And it is indeed a very different angle, because if you focus less on how can we just do what we were doing before, it becomes trickier. I understand that. We understand that becomes hard, but it's not so much on that. It's about how to protect those things that you managed to do in these X years, 7 or a bit longer. How can we make sure that it just doesn't all go to waste, so to say? So that's indeed exactly the point.
Okay, can I go next?
Yes,
Isabel
please go.
Pinto, Build for People. Well, first of all, thank you. Was absolutely clear, the presentation, and I wish that maybe we would have this kind of more clear in the previous workshops, because there's been a bit of contradictory supply of information. I have a very specific question to continue in the document, but before that, sorry, I would build a bit on my colleagues from the co-program partnerships on this clarification, because I still hear so many things in this environment that sometimes there's a bit of confusion between how the partnerships work. So, for example, just some minutes ago, you were saying that as an example for the co-programs, it can become again a self-sustainable organization if there's no fund. So there's no again. So the organizations behind the co-program partnerships are self-sustainable. For many of them, it's not a one-to-one. So the organization does not live from the partnership. There's actually zero funds. It's only a co-program. So the association itself, or what kind of entity it is self-sustainable, many exist for many years and have many activities, and then the partnership is the voice of stakeholders towards the program, and it's managed a bit on the side. So let's not put this one-to-one because this is a very big important part of this exercise, also to the phase out strategy, because there's no need of build new organizations to phase out the strategy. The organization exists and is self-sustainable. So this is just a clarification. Then going back to the scenarios, because I mean, this is clear and it's important we deliver on time and we need to build, improve the documents. So is it then clear that we should not include scenarios towards a new partnership? So this would be really important to clarify here. Shall we exclude them? And then I have a build-on question of that, because I think it's important that we do realistic scenarios. I don't see 3-4 scenarios having a huge detail that you're asking on steps, on KPIs. I think that should be done to, let's say, 2 very good potential realistic scenarios. Otherwise, it's an empty exercise. So this is why my question. So it will be good to fix the energy in 1-2 scenarios with non-EU fund. And you said yourself, there's other scenarios where we could present then the proposals we have. So I think today I would like to make that clear and have it from you. Can future partnerships be included as a scenario or not? Like to make it a clear line.
It's a very clear question, and the answer is yes. Why do we say yes? Because it's part of a future reflection. So it's not completely out of the exercise. How do you envisage your future? The core of the phasing out is with no FP. But if you think that it's important and valuable to include how you will be able or could be a partnership under the next FP, then we are not forbidding that. Because we don't want to be, no, that's not possible. That's not possible. We had guidelines because you can use this flexibility to fill it in a bit. However, and this is very important, if you say you would like to be a partnership, it's first of all, it's different when you start your phasing out strategy saying, look, if we do another partnership, we lose everything. It would be a shame. We need to be a partnership. That's a completely different framework. Introducing your strategy and saying this is a phasing out strategy, we're reflecting on the future, no FP funding first. Also, we reflected on potentially being a partnership under FP10. However, to be actionable, realistic, you need to take into account how it will be done under FP10. Because we read many strategies, we want to continue. Well, but there might not be co-fund structures or co-program structures under FP10. So how will you continue? I mean, that's not part of the exercise in any way, right? So you see the difference. If you say we would like, then think about how you will fulfill all selection criteria of the proposal. Think about with whom you might work if you're a co-fund. With whom will you work in the private? With whom will you work in the public if you're currently those considerations need to be thorough. If that makes sense. I mean, I think that makes sense. So that's for clarity. I hope it's clear.
It makes sense from the perspective also that's a living document, and that kind of scenarios need then to evolve depending how the negotiations and the proposal for the next FP evolves. That makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
All right, if I may go next. So I'm Mathieu Worm from the Virtual Worlds Association. Like Eva mentioned, we are also a very new partnership that actually was signed only in December. So when you just said that it is about securing that what has been built up for the future, so far there has not been built up anything yet, I would say, or it's at least very little. So far we understood that we should imagine that our partnership exists for a couple of years and then look for ways to continue the work that we've just kicked off. But is that then a wrong? So it will make it for me, it complicates the question of what is expected from an exit strategy for a partnership that has just been alive for a month so far.
Yes, it's a good question. It's a valid question. We already said in the guidelines and in the fact that it will be keep obviously into account whether you are as new as you currently are. However, I mean, your partnership was set up based on a well thought through and fine-tuned proposal, right? So you can assume, you can identify those things that will actually happen. Yeah. And you should work with that.
Yeah.
It's a living document. If things change, you can change your strategy. If things become more clear, you can become more clear in your strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try to make something out of that. Yeah.
Thanks. I see a lot of reaction on the FP10 thing, and here it also it's still a proposal. So if you want to have a realistic reflection, you should go with the information that there is available, which is currently, as a proposal stands, tripartite. Will that be the case? We don't know. So it's up to you whether you want to try to think about already such a scenario in your phasing out strategy or not. As was said earlier, you can also leave it out. And you can use that energy or the resources to actually make a case for a partnership when there is more clarity in the correct fora. I think that sums it up. And the same goes for partnerships who might indeed only end in FP11, right? I mean, how will FP11 look like? Here it's even too tricky to start making assumptions because there has not been even any consideration on that. So I think that reasoning is clear. So we have 10 minutes overtime. Are there any other questions? Because I think we should start no later with the breakouts by 2 o'clock.
Can I just ask one question now? I work for the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, which is a co-funded partnership. And yes, you say this is a phasing out strategy, and it should not include scenarios where there is any co-funding or any funding from the FP10. And we shouldn't, it shouldn't really consider what might happen in FP10, but now you still say, yes, you should take that into account. So it's a bit of, contradicting. But also a tri-party partnership with member states together with the private sector and the Commission. Would you then consider a tri-party partnership as having co-fund from FP10 or funding from FP10? Or is it not including funding from FP10? What is the, how do you see that kind of partnership actually?
I'm afraid I'm not 100% understood your question, but I mean, I would like to emphasize though that, I mean, the core of this exercise is no FP funding. So, I mean, I can elaborate if you can maybe clarify a bit, but I don't want to give too much.
Okay. A tri-party partnership, as is proposed in the proposal for the regulation, is that considered to be a partnership with funding from FP10 or not?
Lucas, if I may jump in.
Yes, please.
Yes, I mean, European partnerships in FP10 would, by definition, all be co-funded by the Union and by the framework program.
Okay. So anyhow, okay, I understand. Thank you.
And then maybe
I'm Veronica Rebos from the European Partnership on Animal Health and Welfare. It's a co-funded one. I had seen several times the same question here. It's regarding the timeline you proposed. It is so by 20th of March we have to provide the final version of this living document, this phasing out strategy, and then the EC will approve it. What happens in case there are still questions or still changes requested by the European Commission? Is that something then we need to still improve? Is there a next step to it, or how do you see that?
Well, it's in a way a thorough question that points out maybe a sore point, but the strategy to be legally applied, following the legal, should have an OFP funding with the 4 minimum requirements, right? So we are not anticipating strategies, if I can so that will not have that. So in case, I mean, it goes with the question in the chat. What is the ambition? Well, the ambition is to reflect on making sure how you can preserve and not just let all 7 years or more go to waste. Your ambition is in your hands. It's up to you. There's legal requirements. There are minimum compulsory elements for the phasing out strategy, which we can approve. And afterwards, if things change, big questions, living documents, you can refine, you can follow this up as you are ambitious to, you know, make the most out of it, and not let your legacy just, you know, be out there. I think that clarifies. I hope so. So it's 3:00. Maybe one more question, and then we'll go to the breakout sessions.
I'm not sure if there is an order. If not, I would like to step in.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Angel Sotuña from Aspire Processes for Planet Co-Program Partnership. So thanks for the explanations, but I'm afraid I go out of this meeting having still many doubts and still perceiving inconsistencies. So for example, I have been told that tripartite or tripartite partnerships do not necessarily mean co-funded partnerships. Here you have said, somebody has said, this will be co-funded partnerships, which frankly, I don't think will fly. So that would be very important to clarify. For example, when we talk about the funding now you have said that there are legal implications. How can there be legal implications if we don't become a partnership? And which are these? Because I'm not aware this is written anywhere. So I will focus on this. I have more questions, but if you at least could focus on this, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, so before I give the floor to Catherine, I can quickly highlight that let's see what she can contribute to this, to your answer. But I want to be clear that this workshop is not focused on, you know, the proposal and the tripartite partnership, right? So let's, Catherine, I'll give you the floor, and then we'll jump to the breakout sessions to focus on the core of this workshop today. Thanks.
Thank you, Lucas. Yeah, my apology if maybe I misunderstood the previous question or also didn't express myself properly. When we talk about European partnerships in FP10 and tripartite partnerships, and when I say they're co-funded by the Union, I mean literally co-financed by the Union. Of course, there's a Union contribution to future partnerships, otherwise they would not be European partnerships. I did not use the term co-funded in the meaning of co-funded partnerships as an instrument in the partnerships toolbox today. I feel like that was a point of confusion just now. The idea is that partnerships in the future remain a vehicle for co-programming and co-financing in different ways than we do it today. But the partnerships of the future, if you develop a scenario where you foresee your partnership becoming, merging, whatever, into a tripartite partnership under FP10, then that is a scenario that is not without FP funding. Does that clarify that aspect?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
The other question was not about the partnerships, but was about the legal implications for the scenarios which are not partnerships. I don't know which are
legal
these
implications for the scenarios that are not partnerships. There's not. I think the only time we've talked about legal implications, the phasing out, coming up with a phasing out strategy per se is a legal obligation as per the current Horizon Europe regulation. And when we look at how the current partnerships funded by the current Horizon Europe are performing, if at this point there are no credible phasing out strategies, then that is non-compliance with one of the implementation criteria in the current Horizon Europe legal base, and that will be reflected as such in monitoring and evaluation exercises.
Thanks, Catherine. So this Q&A round, we can wrap up. A lot of questions still, I see. If you have more concrete questions about your specific strategy, this will now be the opportunity to discuss this with the moderators, with the colleagues, and the MEDI colleagues and colleagues from G4, and also within yourself. So please, I think this is a very useful opportunity, as we have seen from the other two. Don't hesitate, don't hold yourself back when it comes to challenges or doubts. However, within the framework of refining, fine-tuning your strategy, let's not get caught up in discussions of FP10, of the proposal, which again falls outside of the scope, which will be done in a different exercise. So following these slides, as I said earlier, room 1, 2, 3, 4, room X cluster 2 means that they can go to the cluster they want. If I'm not mistaken, Resilient Cultural Heritage already talked to colleagues that they are going to join the cluster health. STR, I'm not sure yet. And same for innovative SMEs. I also heard cluster 1, European Open Science Cloud. I'm not sure as well. Please, you can choose, go to the relevant room. The meeting starts at 4. In order to still give you some time, let's say 45 minutes breakout rooms. So we have 10 minutes for a wrap up. I will start the breakout sessions now. So I believe everybody is back in the plenary session. I hope you had a good session where you could still clarify some things, discuss with each other certain challenges or pending things. Let's now hear about these breakout sessions. I'll give the moderator a minute and a half, 2 minutes each, so we don't have to keep anybody longer than 4. I mean, maybe those who want to stay a bit longer, but let's try to wrap it up on time. So please, let's start with the moderator of the first room. Giorgio, the floor is yours. Please.
Yes, no problem. Except I asked Effie to do it. Effie, if you're ready, please take the floor.
Yes, I hope I can. You can hear me. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. 5 points that, of course, that the participants and Giorgio can add as they see fit. So first point was that the starting point of the strategy should be the end of the current framework program funding. So that was confirmed. The next point is that when in the scenario with no framework program funding, then it is reasonable to have priorities in relation to the continuation of some instruments and some activities over some others that may be dropped at the downscaling. So this sounds reasonable. Then another point is that there may need to be a need for time to validate the hypothesis where the scenarios are based upon in order to choose which scenario to follow. And of course, this is also reasonable. It is it needs time and opportunities to change. The strategies are there because it is a living document, so it needs to be revised when hypotheses change or are validated or are not validated. Another point is that what are going to be the legal consequences in a situation where the strategy may be approved by the Commission after the 20th of March, but then because it may have been changed due to the comments received by the Commission and not having gone through consultation again with the governing board, it may be disapproved or it may not be approved as such by the governing board. So what will be the consequences there? this was an important question that needs to be answered. And a final point about opportunities for peer learning is that there are some thoughts, some very good and creative thoughts about using alternative funds, as well as maybe establishing very close collaborations with other partnerships to downscale, to go down the road of the innovation and higher TRL levels, besides the already mentioned financial solutions like, the member states' contributions and so on. I hope I've got it at least,
Thank you, Effie. And I cannot resist sharing the finding that I made 2 weeks ago about the fact that there is a future for everyone, you as partnerships, because once Europe has structured something, the chance that it goes on are very, very high, although not in a different, not in the same format. I discovered 2 weeks ago that the Fund for Research on Coal and Steel, launched in 1953, and which I thought was closed down when a community of coal and steel merged with the Commission, is still funded by one Director General and still alive and kicking, being innovative on coal and steel research.
Okay, thanks, Effie. Thanks, Georgia, for moderating. We have 4 minutes left, 3 highlights to go and a conclusion. So please, room 2, Mans, I ask you to keep it short, to the point. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, just very briefly, just randomly picking out one question was, what do we mean by KPIs? That's something which was asked for to be specified. There was also a comment from quite a few partnerships which are very recent. One, I don't remember which one, 6 months. And for them, it's a very confusing exercise, which is understandable. But it was pointed out several times. And also this question about which other sources of funding could be envisaged. It would be interesting to have some more guidance on that, actually, from the Commission. And then also more specifically, what do we need? What do we mean when we say no continuation? And also in terms of approval, in which order should the General Assembly, respectively the board, approve? A few participants said that it was not appropriate to ask at this stage the General Assembly to approve, because that would cause would not be good. So board okay, but General Assembly not at this stage. I stop there.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mans, for those. Moving on to the room 3, cluster 5. Floor is yours.
Noemi, I don't know if you want to jump in, if you want me to do it. Okay, I'll do it very quickly then. Well, in our case, we have in our cluster, in our session, we had both co-programmed and co-funded partnerships, and there is a bit of a difference there when they approach their phase-out strategy. In the case of co-programmed, and we have a number of cases where actually the association was already there and the partnership came as an extra somehow, which means that the continuation of or the legacy part of the partnership is ensured by default because it's a self-standing organization already somehow. There is obviously a challenge when you talk about membership, because obviously the membership of those associations on which they live, from which they live, is dependent or is influenced by the access to the framework program funding. But even so, when associations are able to do that exercise, and they have done it, there is still a strong case towards self-sustainability of the associations in the co-program. This is a different setting when you talk about co-funded, because obviously we are dealing here mostly with funding agencies from member states, and therefore the self-sustainability is it's a different case. There the scenario is a bit more complicated and would actually mean a different approach to it, which might actually maybe try to make them a different kind of association or a different kind of entity. There was a recurring question about the details that are asked by the Commission in terms of future sustainability. Do partnerships need to share the amount of the fees amount that they are going to charge from their constituents, from their members, or do they need just to show that there is a credible path towards sustainability? One constant challenge that was mentioned during this exercise is that it's a moving target. So it's very difficult to actually create a trustworthy scenario if the context is constantly moving. It's a difficult exercise. So again, we go back to the living document. It's a living strategy that needs to be adapted. I think that was, at least from my perspective, were the main highlights, but Noemi, please do come in if I missed something relevant.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I had problem with my mic before. So yeah, I think everything you said is pretty much the same. I think the most urgent point was the timeline, because everybody highlighted the fact that there are so many stakeholders that they need to consult before March. And I think everybody was worried that the timeline is a bit strict because they need to consult with the partners, with the stakeholder and with the governing boards before submitting. So I think that was one of the main concerns. And then I think, yeah, Rui already said most of the things.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot both for this. Let's go to the final one, cluster 6. We are 2 minutes over time, so please keep it short so I can still add a brief conclusion and next steps without keeping everybody over time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. So I basically identified four key points. Following of what was previously said, it's important to get a clear view what's demanded by the EC and the timeline, as well as the status of development of each partnerships and the tools available to be used, not only the framework programs, but also the networks that can be accessed or not in the future. Secondly, it was remarked as important to have internal discussions and involve the stakeholders through active thinking about the possible scenarios and their outcome, and integrate all the collected information into the draft we delivered. Third, it was remarked to focus on the legacy and prioritize around that. What is the key? What is key is what you want to keep beyond the partnership life. And finally, address the risk, financially speaking, of every scenario and focus on which essential activities will remain and which not in relation to funding possibilities of the scenarios. Prioritization is essential. If you want to add something else, Jorge, please be my guest. Thank you.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thanks, Gonzalo, for that update. Or like better highlights of your session. So just to move forward and from the things we have heard, the highlights, I believe my colleagues probably would have stepped in and already clarified. As I said as well, there will be an updated frequently asked questions document that will be provided as soon as possible. This recording will be shared on the ERA-Learn event webpage as soon as possible, maybe still even this day, although this week, otherwise early next week, so you can already have that for your information. We would like to thank you all for being here today. I hope I managed to clarify the Commission feedback and some points of strengthening, fine-tuning on top of your individual feedback. Lastly, a point that came up also in my cluster group was this workshop on the EIT. Let's be clear here that this EIT workshop is something that they organize to assist you and to help share their experience on how they went to financial sustainability. This is, of course, different. EIT kicks are on itself different. They also need to be financial. They need to go and get financial sustainable as by their legal documents. So this is voluntary. This is we encourage this, obviously, because we think it's very good. You might learn something, but it's important, as it was said, you're comparing apples with pears. It's still valuable information that they might share on potential membership fees, other works, or other ways of how to start implementing if you have any of these things. So it's voluntary. We recommend it because it might be good to also reflect further, but just to make that difference clear and that we are aware. There will be no workshop from our side anymore. This was the second and the final one. So the next step would be to share your final with the European Commission by Friday, 20 March. Then there will be a week for the Commission to give the approval. And then after you get approval, there will be immediate adoption of the strategies within the relevant governance structure. And then afterwards, you inform the Commission on the adoption. We will come back in writing on the immediate adoption. The difference between the General Assembly and the Governing Board for Co-Program Partnerships is apparently very different practically. So we'll come back on writing on this question on how that should be dealt with. Without further ado, 6 minutes late, I wish you all a very nice afternoon, evening. I really hope that this was helpful and it will help you to fine-tune, strengthen your strategies by the set deadline of 20th of March. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Lucas, to you and your colleague from G4. Really, you've been doing an incredible work in reading all the things and commenting all the reports in due time. It was a great work and for organizing today. Thanks.